Welcome to 6 Feet in the Six. I'm your host, Jeff Bear with Business Interiors. Thank you for joining us today. The purpose of this interview series is for the close-knit Toronto commercial real estate industry to share ideas and best practices in order to get everyone back to the office safely and efficiently. We'll be interviewing leaders from commercial real estate, project management, interior design, commercial end users, and product manufacturers. Joining us today is Dave Lehto, Executive Vice President and National Lead, Project and Development Services for JLL Canada. Dave, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
I can. Born and raised in Northern Ontario, Sudbury. Went to Queen's University and did a civil engineering degree out of there. Graduated back in the early 90s. There weren't a lot of jobs around. Got into construction. Finally got into an environmental firm that I liked working with. It was interesting because I really liked the research part of the business, and I also liked the project management. And I was working on this really cool program for the oil companies on their dike containments of their big bulk farms. And we were coming up with all kinds of theories of how, contamination would flow underground and how we could contain it and all this. And I was working with this guy who was a PhD, and his PhD was in slug tests. That's how focused he was. And he knew stuff that I knew I was never going to truly understand, nor did I want to understand. But I knew I could manage him, and I knew I could convey that information to clients a lot better than he could, because he was just, spent 10 years in research of slug tests. You tend to know a lot about one thing. And so I started getting more and more into projects, and then just wanted bigger and bigger projects and bigger. So I went from this small company to CH2M Hill at the time, working on big environmental projects. Was asking around in the industries, who's the best in project management in the industry, and I got directed to this guy Brian Sababin over at Stantec. He had sold his company along with a bunch of others, and I was mentored under him for a dozen years. Then took over his role of running the national practice over at Stantec for project management, and then decided to change focus a little bit and just focus on what I really like to do, which is owner's rep project management. And so moved over to JLL 2 years ago, and have been working here, ever since, trying to grow this practice. It was a small practice that was growing fast, had a lot of potential, a lot of big clients out of the U.S. And that's where I find myself now. So it's been great.
Do you find your earlier days in some of those more technical projects have helped you in your role today?
I think so, but part of it's a blessing but a curse, because part of it is you almost know too much that you want to get into the weeds, but you're not. I shouldn't. I still do. It's completely in me, but I do it from a more of this is what I know, and I try to lend it to somebody else so that they can then take it and do something great with it. So that's kind of been my approach.
Well, I think you're lucky you have a killer team behind you, so I'm sure that makes it easier.
Sure do.
So personally, how are you managing?
Good. It's not too bad. For the last 4 years, I could have done my job from home, but I like the personal interaction. So, whether it's flying to Vancouver or the office in Calgary, meeting the folks up in Edmonton or Montreal, that's a part of it I really miss right now.
Feel like I can get a lot more meetings in a day because there's no travel and you connect to a lot of clients, but there's obviously something missing. It's not the same as getting together, for sure. We add the most value when we're in front of our clients, and we spend our days trying to make sure we're in front of our clients and helping. Clients might find it easier now to interact with us via Zoom now that we're all getting used to it, right? And so us as people who are client facing, I'm really worried that after this, there might be a lot less facing meetings, like even after the vaccine, because we got so used to this. So I would hate, that's the best part of my job, is being with clients. So I would hate to lose that part, right?
I think it will be more purposeful. I'm looking at this, and I gained back 3.5 hours of commuting a day, and that 3.5 hours, I spend at least an hour more with my kids. I don't rush through cooking meals. I exercise anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half a day now. So there's a lot of plus sides to not always being downtown or in the office just because that's what you do.
So is there something that you've had to do during this quarantine that you've never had to do before? For example, let's state the obvious here. I have a shaved head. I've never shaved my head before. And it was either trust my girlfriend with a fade or let her shave the whole thing.
I went 7 weeks without shaving off a beard. And I've never gone more than 2 because, frankly, it's just too itchy.
So, Dave, this is a segment where we ask our guests what face mask you've been rocking. So I know you've said you haven't left the house very often. You have most things delivered. But when you do, what are you typically wearing?
Well, typically I'm wearing this because I actually get out of the house to do cycling. I'm one of those guys going up and down the street, spreading all my germs everywhere on my bike. But I will wear this, top of this, like this. But if I really had to, and I was not prepared, I do have a proper mask.
Wow, that looks
I don't have any no cartridges, completely useless. So, I guess, yeah. So it looks good, and I can breathe in and out, but it's not really stopping anything from flowing.
We are taken care of because my girlfriend's mother decided to bust out the sewing machine and make face masks for all of her loved ones. So what I'm going to do, since I have to do a lot of these episodes, is I'm going to feature a different design on each episode. So today, we're going to go with the all black.
Yeah.
Oh, my iPad.
How many layers?
So it's made out of the reusable grocery bags. She chopped them up. So I got like 12 different textiles. So I'm going to break one out for each interview. Shout out Debbie. She's working her tail off, making sure everyone's safe. So thank you, Debbie. Your business, how has it changed in the past month? What are your projects? How have they been affected? Have some of them changed course? What can you tell us?
Until the shutdowns happened, things were going pretty good. Right off the bat, there's certain things you want to do. You want to make sure everybody's safe. Then after a couple of weeks of being, hanging around the house, make sure, okay, how's everybody's morale? Then you want to understand, okay, is everybody being productive? Who's busy, who's not busy? Because, definitely there were impacts to projects. Things did start to slow down. Trades were coming back and saying, hey, you know what, we're not coming to site this week. We're just waiting to see what happens, or, a positive case happens on a site. And that did happen in several situations. But, for the most part, we were still chugging along. We limited site visits. So you had to get senior vice president approval, which means there's only a handful of us that are, that are senior vice president. And if they weren't comfortable with giving approval, they would come to me and I would, make a decision on it. But we were just trying to limit, why are we going to site? Why are we going to, this space or this office? Because, people don't really, I guess they're not really thinking about the risk. They're just thinking, hey, I got a job to do. So when it comes to design part of the projects just kept moving along. There was no issues there. 10, 12 years ago, it would have been a problem. Now there's none. Anything in the early planning stage, they wanted to rethink it because they didn't know, is this going to cost me more? Is it going to take me longer to build out? There was too many variables. What's my office space going to look like? And they, people still don't really know, right? It's a bit of a crapshoot. Everybody's going to come up with great ideas and pitch these things around, and then the vaccine's going to happen. Everybody's like, hey, I don't want this anymore. Change is good for us. We're always busy when there's change, but there's meaningful change and then there's not so meaningful change.
Do you find province by province, there's a lot of different ideas, rules, laws that are being implemented that you have to comply to?
Absolutely. Yeah. We put out like a construction update regularly, probably every couple of weeks we update it. And I have to go from province to province to province to province and look at it. Our researchers do it too, but I kind of want to do it for my own familiarity to see what's happening, see what is changing.
So what are some of the most common new requests you're getting from your clients since this has happened?
Well, of course, a lot of them are rethinking their workplace strategy. If it's early enough to actually go back, sometimes if you're under the gun on your timeline, you're making minor adjustments throughout design, or you're consulting with people, furniture suppliers, with designers, with health and safety professionals. What should we do with our office that's under construction? So, I guess that's a concern that, if you're under construction, you've already got everything bought, you're just waiting to get back to work to actually go finish that. How do you make those minor adjustments as you go? So that for our group, like we're implementers. We do have workplace strategists inside of the organization, and they are busy. They're working 14, 16 hours a day. It's constant.
So can you tell me about some of the programs, services that JLL has come out with in the past month that you'd like people to know about?
Well, you know what? Just kind of what I was mentioning a minute ago with the claims review committee. So it's not we don't want to be claims consultants. That's a tough business. You kind of polarize one party depending on who you're representing, and we're in an industry where it's about relationships and partnerships. Even if you are on the other side of the table, we're on the owner's side, you still have to have relationships with everybody to get things done. But the claims review committee itself is a way of pulling in how contractors are approaching the situation, how clients are approaching the situation, and the multiple, like there's a lot of different approaches and a lot of different angles that everybody's coming back at. And so I actually have, our folks in China, and actually we have an office in Wuhan, they are providing me with information because they're really just getting back into construction. You hear all about manufacturing being up to 80 or 100%. Construction is not, according to them. And they're just saying they're still trying to figure all this out. How do we get back to safe construction? How do we monitor productivity? So they're going to be providing us with a lot of feedback on how they're going to do it.
So there's a lot of noise out there as to what the new normal may look like. I think there's unfortunately a lot of the information out there is kind of being called the new normal, where I really think it should be more aligned with this is what we should do if we have to go back to the office pre-vaccine.
Yep.
So what are, in your opinion, what are some of the things that you've heard out there in terms of protocols or design ideas or maintenance that you think commercial tenants should be thinking about if they do have to go back to the office?
Interesting thing about that I heard from the folks in China is that nobody wants to go out for lunch anymore. So everybody's bringing their own lunch, but there's a shortage of microwaves in the kitchen because they're not used to having everybody show up and bring a lunch. What they're seeing is really long lineups for the microwave. Not enough microwaves, right? So how are we going to deal with our kitchens? I think our kitchen has 3 microwaves in it. And if we have 150 people in the office, which I can't imagine there's going to be 150 people at any point in the next 6 months. But if we did, that's a long wait for everybody to go 3-4 minutes to warm up their meal. Plus you got to grab that handle, and you got to stand 6 feet apart. So you're sneaking around through the place, waiting in line to use a microwave.
It's opening up the office is one thing, but you're right. Like getting to the office, if you're going to open up a downtown office, a lot of those people use public transit to commute in there, and as safe as you can make your office, the organization doesn't have control on those other elements.
I think there's a lot of details that have to be worked out still.
Yeah, and it's kind of a hard question for me to ask you right now because I think it's way too early to have an answer. So
I think so too. Yeah. We're going to see other jurisdictions open up, and we're going to learn from them. I think the challenge is the time lag between when you actually get the virus and when you start to show symptoms.
So there's been a lot of new products that have come on the market in the past month. I think some are really interesting and some are a little opportunistic. I thought we could review one of those products today and get your opinion on its viability for the office. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
So I won't call out any particular manufacturer because we've seen a lot of them, but these are the wellness screens is what they've been termed. So these are clear plexiglass screens that can be attached to workstations. They've also been adapted to testing booths, a booth that you may have at the entrance of a building and measuring people's temperature as they're coming through. But the application to workstations has been a big discussion. Some people believe that having taller screens around every workstation in the office is something that we need to be doing. Some believe that's a short-term solution. Some believe that that might be a long-term solution. Some people believe these screens should be used only for public-facing spaces, so your reception area, which I think is very practical. But what are your thoughts?
I'm not a huge fan of them for the workplace. Ideally, if you're doing all of the screening prior to getting into the workplace, you're okay to be in there. It's an added measure, and I think it's a temporary measure. I don't think anybody wants them. It's more out of a necessity. Now, there may be environments like certain call centers. I could see why they would want that. They're going to be there. They're packed in pretty tight. Are you going to be able to affix them to benching style?
You're able to, yes.
Yeah. And then what does it look like? So I'm getting into the details, but what does it look like when you take it out? You have to fill in these holes because eventually somebody's going to take them out. It's going to be needed in certain situations, but I don't think it's going to be wanted. And I think once the vaccine is out there and everybody is much more comfortable, they're all going to be gone. So now we got this huge waste. Maybe somebody has to think, okay, cradle to grave. Like, what are you gonna do with it after?
Screens in the office are being positioned as a solution, which I'm on the fence about because it's all about trying to block air, which I think is not possible with a screen. Air, especially in the buildings with these HVAC systems, is moving around rapidly, right? So having two additional feet in front of you of screen, may catch a direct hit of a sneeze, but we're still sharing that air. If we're all in a pod of workstations, even if we're distanced, we're still sharing that air throughout the day, whether that screen is there or not. Yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense in areas that you can't control, like a public facing reception area. If you have someone receiving deliveries, packages all day, those screens I think make a lot of sense. But I'm really disappointed with the amount of research out there that is suggesting that we need a lot more screens in the office. Your point, what's going to happen to these screens after the fact? There's going to be a landfill full of them. But there's been no research to suggest that a taller screen is the answer. No official has actually said that, but that seems to be where all the research is guiding us toward. There are some organizations that unfortunately will purchase these things out of fear or out of, just fear of their employees not appreciating being forced back to work, and not every precaution available on the internet has been deployed in that space, right? There's even possible class action lawsuits that could come from this down the road. So I think organizations will be buying these things just to say that they could say we did everything we could.
Did everything we could. Yeah. Well, you look at Costco. To me, from what I saw, and every one of these grocery outlets all had a different approach and a different timing of things. But the Costco I have up in Newmarket, they had plexiglass screens up fairly quickly, and they had markings on the floor. To me, a lot sooner than some of the other organizations, like grocery stores and stuff. And yet you still get outbreaks. You about the one in Vaughan, right? So, 5 employees, and it's going to happen. It's all about the odds. That's why we're all at home right now. It's because we're trying to lower the odds of too many people getting it at once.
Dave, thank you for joining us today and sharing how JLL is joining the fight against COVID-19. Keep up the good work.
Thanks for having me.
This is Jeff Barrett. Thanks again for joining us. Toronto, you're the best city in the world, and we can't wait for you to feel better again.